Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. This is just the start. With the rest of the speakers, take your seats. So we start our roundtable, how to make a doctor patient-oriented. And of course, within this discussion, within our topics today, it's one of the most important topic for many participants of today's panel and for the participants in the room. So we'll try to organize this discussion in a way that, of course, we'll have speeches, but also it would be wonderful to discuss it like as a dialogue, not just listen to speeches. I'd like to briefly introduce our today's speakers, and you'll see that they have quite different profiles, different areas of expertise, and altogether I think we'll manage to create a very interesting discussion. So we have Alexei Khrypun, Minister of Moscow government and the head of Moscow Healthcare Department. Sergei Kim, Professor of the International Center of Bundan Hospital of Seoul National University. Anna Hasina, psychologist, business consultant, director of consulting company Mass Management. Graham Rich was top manager international healthcare service in the UK. Vyacheslav Tsibulnikov, head of the board of directors of Sberbank in Moscow. Marie Langerak, the head of the innovation program of the client experience improvement and the increase of quality of professional services, Royal Philips. Olga Fefilova, director of Center of Government Services, My Documents. Natalia Mantrova, plastic surgeon. And Peter Messer, director of palliative help, Russian activist and the organizer of hospices of Vera. So what we would like to discuss today? Of course, many of you who were present at the plenary session, so they discussed there are a lot of changes in the healthcare system. And most of digital transformation leads to the change of the role of the doctor. On the one hand, it gives a lot of opportunities to a modern doctor. On the other hand, it raises lots of questions, like will AI replace a doctor? All these digital technologies, will they disrupt this connection between a doctor and the patient? How to motivate doctors to be patient-oriented? What kind of profile this new doctor should have of this new decade? That's the question we'd like to discuss today. And at the beginning, I'd like to share some research that our company BCG made to look at trends of healthcare and how Moscow, with all its initiatives, looks in within these trends. And one of key trends of the global healthcare is, of course, the change of the doctor's role. Of course, as I said already, there are quite a lot of challenges that change the role of a doctor, and there are a lot of opportunities as well. So the amount of citizens that we have in towns increases, more senior people, and it also leads that we have more people with comorbidity, more burden on the healthcare system, which also leads to the fact that we see shortage of medical personnel, like doctors and nurses. But at the same time, we have new opportunities that will bring change into healthcare system, digital technologies, new technologies of treatment, and it all leads to the creation of a new image of this Doctor 2.0. where a doctor can delegate more and more of administrative and routine tasks to the nurses. Some tasks are for now on patients. We are more and more involved in the management of our own health, and some of the doctor's tasks are automated thanks to new technologies. Second, it's more active use of technologies in decision making and all the stages of treatment, starting with diagnosis and up to choosing the specific treatment for this patient that will give the best results. The third is that the profile of the doctor is changing as well, and we as patients become more and more demanding. There are many parallels from other areas, and we bring them to medical care. So we require more service, more access to our data, that the decisions are made related to us are based on data. So that's are the expectations that really transform doctors. And of course, it all leads that changes are getting faster and faster, and traditional models of education and retraining are not fast enough to catch up with the changes. And we see that in the medical science we need this ongoing education, new formats of treatment also help with that. I'd like to speak separately about each of these points, and then we'll discuss each of them within our discussion. So we talked about this slide already at the panel discussion, that in many big cities in the world we see up to 30% of doctors' time is for routine and administrative tasks. And if we have a look at Moscow, up to 60% of doctors' time can be free thanks to this for some key medical tasks. And there are some tools that help to increase efficiency of doctors' work. Automated assistants that help recognize speech and make them print into the medical record, and delegation of some functions to nurses for some routine tasks. And in the far, maybe not that far future, more and more tasks will be performed by digital technologies. Second thing is this symbiosis of a doctor and artificial intelligence, and that's the topic that I'd like to raise today within our discussion, because some people see it as a threat, and we hear from doctors such comments as like, will they be replaced by AI? And some people see it as big opportunities, like AI will considerably decrease the risks of mistakes, and especially we can see it when we diagnose, when we read all the images. Diagnosis made by AI are better than what a doctor can do. So it may be very good support. But of course, all these decisions may be seen through all the way of interaction of doctors and patients. I can also give two examples. At the prevention stage, and when we define the disease, artificial intelligence can help us predict the appearance of some diseases in the US. For instance, AI allows to find the causes 3 years before symptoms appear. On the other hand, you know about diagnostics. There are some interesting solutions on the treatment stage that allow you to make your treatment more and more personalized and patient-focused. That what you can see at the assembly of Moscow Health, to create systems that support medical decisions, that help doctors to prescribe medicine and to choose the proper way of treat the patients. And also at the rehabilitation stage, there are some interesting solutions, how to care for people at home, to find some deviations in some traditional actions of senior people and to signal the doctor if something's wrong, not usual. Move to the next slide. Of course, it all defines the new role of a doctor. So a doctor becomes a health partner. So what do we mean by that? Just we expect more and more that a doctor will discuss together with patients the plan of treatment and to help make a choice. In other cities, we can see a lot of examples when a patient, based on data received from doctor, makes a decision what kind of treatment he'd like. One of the examples here is, for example, when there is prostate cancer, some patients do not want to get surgery and they opt for chemotherapy because that will make them a better quality of life. Of course, that means that a doctor should develop new skills and foster the existing ones. And of course, here it's a lot of digital skills. To be able to use all these systems, you need skills how to use computers, new systems, and so on. A big focus is also on developing cognitive skills, the ability to think outside the box, to be able to adapt, and of course some interpersonal, some communicational skills. And these interpersonal skills, communication skills, are really important because there are less and less interaction between the doctor and the patient. And to keep this relationship is very important, this partnership relations. And to help a doctor, so if I were a doctor and hear all that, I would have thought, how can I learn all that fast? Now there are many formats and platforms that help you with that. It's all kind of online courses. It's also a possibility to see what your colleagues do remotely. For instance, doctors can look at surgeries that are performed in the other part of the world. Gamification. So that allow you to have some real cases. It's through virtual reality and augmented reality. So all these factors together, they shape this new image of this Doctor 2.0. And I'll stop here. And I think I'd like to give the floor to Alexei, that he'll tell us what Moscow is doing in this direction. And can you quote some interesting examples? Thank you, Ekaterina. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's hard not to agree with the fact that the image and the role of a doctor has been really changing, as well as what we can say about the patients. In all our social and professional discussions, we use these terms: patient-orientedness, patient-oriented doctor, patient-centered models of development of healthcare, and so on. So first patient-oriented doctor was Hippocrates, probably, who said that a doctor should treat not the disease but the patient, meaning the specific patient, not some abstract patient. That really shows us this patient-oriented approach to the health of a person. By the way, the hall where we are held the name of Botkin, who has the same ideology and philosophy. So all the points that Ekaterina presented They are reflected in Moscow healthcare development during the last couple of years. They really mirror what Ekaterina mentioned. I'd like to talk about it. The most important thing, now I'm addressing my colleagues who are here, the most important thing for us is to understand that patient-oriented doctors, to create such a doctor, it's a very slow and difficult way. It's not a set of some occasional events or projects, some gadgets. It's a serious transformation of the whole system where we work. It's a system of measures aimed at creating the specific environment. So internally we should change our whole culture. Then everyone, as well doctors and all our professional community, will follow the way that the whole world follows. So it's really great that today we hear a lot of discussions related to this topic, a lot of speeches from foreign experts. So to make it clear for everyone that it's not me or my colleagues who invented it, it's a global trend, and it's a very serious factor of development of the modern healthcare system. This development is provided by many factors, including technological components that allow to free some of doctors' time to talk to a patient, and Ekaterina told us about that. A lot is done in Moscow in relation to that. The most impressive resource is this unified medical system that integrates all the outpatient clinics, and in a year and a half, 2 years, it will integrate the whole healthcare system of Moscow with one information carrier as a medical record. Now we have electronic medical records in outpatient clinics, and every citizen now can have a look at it and check what's inside. So now patients are the equal participants, and it also makes doctors more reliable and disciplined. Of course, it was hard when we introduced this electronic systems of digital records. We made courses and trained nurses how to type, brought a lot of well-known specialists, but it's still not that easy. For instance, Maxim Reshetnikov at the plenary session said about the global experience of Perm region, and they analyze the amount of clicks that a doctor makes. They reduce them by 35% and thinks it's a great progress. Through difficulties, of course, we will reach the point where all these technologies will free a lot of time, a significant amount of time for communication with patients. So that's why it was also mentioned today. So just for you to understand that the system of support of medical decision-making, it's not a myth. 120 people within the department are working within 11 clinical committees, and they already adapted 45 clinical protocols for diseases that most patients come with to our outpatient facilities. They adapted it according to the international clinical recommendations, so now it's being digitalized, and then it will be implanted into these medical records, and we'll be able to give a doctor such a tool as creating a package administration prescription, so like just one click will replace other.
So it's not total standardization. Of course, we understand that there is some individual, some specific patient behind it, but this technology can simplify the routine activity of our medical specialists. We have started already introducing different elements of artificial intelligence. You know, there is a single system which is part of MES, and we have over 3 million images in the system. We have already connected it to our PACS conservation system. So this enables us to test different opportunities and different potential of different products in mammography, in lungs, X-rays. So this is a long-term project that is going to be implemented in Moscow, and it's already underway. We have been working actively to transform text and speech in the digital form in 7 clinics. And our diagnostic specialists have tested these technologies based on different protocols and templates, so they can introduce different protocols that they create into the system of electronic medical records and save a lot of time. So it means that we are going to replicate and multiply these technologies. 2 more examples. When we asked our medical community that work at clinics, what kind of furniture would you like to have? We asked all 135 clinics, because we are going to do renovation, so we're going to equip them with new equipment. So what kind of furniture would you like to see? What kind of armchair would you like to use? So these are very important elements, because this hopefully will transform the awareness of and mindset of our medical specialists towards patient-oriented model, because we understand how important it is to look towards the patient. We are having 11 centers that are implementing this program, so this helps us to become more aware, and they understand how important it is to concentrate their attention on each patient. And basically it is very professional, you know. The doctors don't have to rush, they have enough time to do what they have to do to work with the patient. We also started our intensive care program so that we could comfort all the relatives and support the patient, so that we could show them that we don't have any secrets and we are happy to cooperate with them. I could give you more examples, but the most important thing is how we choose those that are going to work at our clinics, what kind of training we provide, what we do. As you probably know, we have set up a Center for Accreditation and Professional Development. It's working on the basis of our performance evaluation database that we set up for Moscow doctors. It's very important to support our doctors, not only materially and financially, but also to create the special atmosphere of recognition, public recognition in particular. So we have already gave training for over 2,000 specialists, and 40% of these people got some jobs. So these have been our first steps. We hope that we will have all the specialists go through the center, because the center delivers a special educational program that includes different competences, for example, stress resistance, communication skills, and many other things to interact with the patients effectively. We also set up a school for professional growth and development. We work together with universities. We go to different universities trying to find the best students. So we give some incentives to the teachers and professors, and we try to educate such students. We are having about 200 specialists that work here. So I have told you about different initiatives, different projects and events, and we have more and more of them to come. So it shows good progress. But of course, we understand that patient-oriented doctor, the doctor 2.0, is not only about a series of events. It has to be systematic, because it's all about the environment and the system and changing our culture. And this is just the beginning of our way. Thank you, Alexei. Very interesting examples. I was very happy to hear about things that you implement. Let me ask you one question. You told us about your experience in healthcare sector over 30 years. So what do you think about the changes that we see today as a doctor? Are you happy about them, or do you see the uncertainty, or maybe you see some opportunities? So what do you think about it? Of course, they are all new opportunities, and I have told you about them already. And if I think about my younger years, I can say that I was very lucky, because my teachers that worked in the 4th clinical hospital, a surgical hospital, they were very many, and all of them told me, Alexei, please remember, the most important thing is the interest of our patient. The patient is always right, no matter what kind of state he or she has. The patient is always right. We have to work for the patient, and we work as a team. I think that's a very important argument to develop an environment. So that's why this ideology is very close to me. I understand it very well. Thank you. Now, continuing our topic of different projects and solutions, Sergey, I wanted to ask you a question. You are working at the Bandan Hospital, so we know it as a digital hospital. It means that there is no paper. So what kind of solutions have you already embedded in order to give more time to the doctors? And how did you motivate the doctors so that they could use this solution, so that the doctors felt comfortable and could see it as an opportunity and not as a threat? Colleagues, let me thank you for the invitation to come to this forum. I represent Kundan Hospital of Seoul National University, which is well known all over the world. It was opened in 2003, and it is well known as a hospital that started working without any paper or film. Everything is done digitally. I think hospital information system that we created is quite unique, and it helped us do many things to reduce the workload of doctors and nurses. I mean routine work, because there are many options that we can use to automate doctors' work. I can mention several functions, and all these functions are automated. For example, set appointment. Each doctor can choose different points that have to be tested for a specific patient. For example, the doctor usually sees the patients between 9 to 2, and they can see about 100 to 140 patients. So let's say there's a patient that has a problem with their liver. It could be, carcinoma. So this doctor can just click, and there will appear all the tests that the patient has to take. And the same is true for inpatient facilities. There's a clinical protocol developed by our hospital and a set of prescriptions. For example, if there are no other pathologies, but the patient has stomach cancer. So this patient comes one day before the surgery. So when the doctor sees this patient, he makes just one click and he will embed a set of certain procedures for 5 days of hospitalization. What kind of procedures, what kind of drugs the patient will need. Of course, these can be adjusted depending on the state of the patient, but the most important thing is that it's automatic. So the doctor doesn't have to think what he has to do, for example, what he has to prescribe to the patient after gastrectomy. And it also includes the system to support medical decision-making. And it's a really important thing, and it helps to reduce different heterogenic things in a hospital to make the patient safe, because we can control the overdosing of drugs or incompatible drugs. Whatever there's needed, the system supports. So the automation of these processes implies that the doctor has much more time to talk with the patient. And it's true that this is a universal trend. Doctors have to be patient-oriented. Of course, the medical system in Korea is very different from Russia, but anyway, for us it's very important to be patient-oriented, and I can say that only 5% of medical facilities in Seoul are public facilities, and 90% are private facilities. We belong to the university, and we are not part of that number of 5%. So it means that there are very good conditions for competition. Each hospital is trying to be the best to attract the patients. The more patients they can attract, the more money they will make. So medical institutions have to do a lot of things to create appropriate infrastructure and do many other things to attract patients. And of course, the doctors have to be patient-oriented so that the patients were willing to go to that doctor. And one of other things that I could mention is the involvement of the patient in the process of treatment. For example, the doctor has to discuss every single thing with the patient, and it means that the patient gets involved into this process. The doctors explain the diagnosis, risks, the forecasts that could be made. And the patient can choose any method of treatment. So it's not the doctor that decides what to do to the patient. They work together so that they could develop a plan of treatment together. So that's what I wanted to share with you, and This is what I wanted to tell you about the way medical institutions work in Korea. Thank you very much. It was very interesting for me to listen to your talk. And it's very interesting that you stick to this philosophy that you focus on the patient and the patient becomes the center of attention, but you also think of doctors, because you know if the doctors are not happy, it will be very difficult for the doctors to make the patient happy. So that's why the programs that you have for motivating doctors and for supporting doctors are very important. And continuing the subject of patient-oriented services, I would like to give the floor to Anna so that she could tell us about this service and how it can be developed. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting discussion, a representative panel. I felt that Alexei's words resonated with me when he told us that his teachers used to say that the interests of the patients should be the main thing. So how can we do this in practice? You know, it's good, it sounds good, but what can we do to fulfill this principle? I remember an informal survey that took place on Facebook, and it was about the level of aggression in doctor-patient interaction. So 75% of doctors said that they began to face a lot more of aggression from the patients, you know, shouts, complaints, and many mentioned that patients were not happy about them, and 22% of patients said that whenever they were to see a doctor, they were ready for insults from the doctor won't explain anything, and the doctors would demonstrate aggression and lack of interest. So it looked like the level of aggression was growing all the time. So this is the reality that we should take into account. I think there are 3 levels of aggression, but let's start with the top and take a look at the community. You know, our society has very high level of aggression. We are not good at conflict resolution, you know, but conflicts are an integral part of our life. They appear no matter what. So the doctors sometimes as well as the patients, do not have the right instruments as to how to deal with this. So why does it happen? I guess both parties feel defenseless against the system. We don't have any legislation, and in the absence of the insurance of doctors' responsibility and doctors' errors, you know, the doctors are afraid of prosecution, and the patients are unprotected. So it means that they are ready to deal with any issue in an aggressive way. Now let's go down one level and take a look at the level of different medical organizations. There are many things that are not related to the communication between patients and doctors, but they influence this process. For example, we speak about patients and how important it is for them to feel comfortable. So, for example, they can go on the website and and make an appointment? Can they do it at any time? If they call the call center, can they get a good answer to the questions or very vague? Then if they want to clarify something, what can they do? Where should they go? Most advanced patients try to check it on the Instagram or on Facebook, or some gurus that tell them about some chronic broglios, and you know all the stories. It's a hell of things. So all these things are very annoying, and patients get irritated because of that. So and sometimes patients want to share their unsatisfaction before the doctor says anything. Now, if we move one level down and focus on the interaction between doctors and patients, we will see that the doctors sometimes don't have time, or are very tired, or don't give a chance to the patient to make decisions for themselves, whereas the patients would welcome this opportunity.
So we see that patients are very opposite to all this service treatment method. So people think that this patient-oriented approach is something cherry on a cake that a doctor is supposed to do, but that's not how it works. If you go to the definition of the patient-orientedness, it's medical help that's based on principles of mutually beneficial partnership between doctors, patients, and their family members. That's how it was defined in Pico Institute, in Harvard School, and Hippocrates, of course, and Botkin. They were much earlier, but they named it. They use the same ideas, but maybe with these different words. So any medical organization is supposed to be patient-oriented. It means that doctors not only understand about the diseases, but also about patients as people, about their life, about their intentions, about their internal image of disease, about emotions that go together with the disease, about awareness level, knowledge that the patient has about disease outcome, and also the motivation and compliance of the patient, because it's a very big problem for any doctor. So of course, all the doctors want to increase the compliance of their patients. So we want all of that. But on the other hand, why is it important? In the global practice, there is a great evidence base when we see that patient-oriented communication, and we are coming to that, it should be as part of doctors' skills. It really it's not only make a patient happy, but it also impacts many different things. For instance, patient compliance. So if doctors are talking well with the patient, then the patient will have better compliance. To the speed and quality of diagnostics. The number of visits to doctors, the more reliable are these relationships are, the less patient comes to a doctor. And that all relates to all the spending to healthcare. And the duration of this visits are also shorter and shorter. Without even mentioning the satisfaction of doctors by their activity, and decreases the level of stress and burnout, because it's a very big social issue. Overall, doctors are under stress, and we can't really talk about it because we don't measure it and we don't see the dynamics. So the right communication should be created, and when I talk about it, I'm often asked, so what we're discussing is just some common sense and a good upbringing of a doctor. Yes, it's true, but it's also true that for a doctor, these skills should be structured. So how he can create such contact, such trustworthy contact, such patient-oriented communication when he has no more than 20 minutes for an appointment. And there are tools in the global practice, some specific models, we can work with them. And for that we have to train our doctors. When should we start? Since the first year. Since the first day of the first year we should start and never stop. Like we have this ongoing system of medical education related to professional skills. In the same way we should build in this big part that's called medical communication. And this communicative competence of a doctor is part of their professional skills. Who are doing it now? So some specific doctors who understood that it's important. So they look for this information and train themselves on their own. I really hope that it will be built into this ongoing education system. And for now, so the main reliable institution is the head of the organization. So I really encourage all the heads of medical organizations to give the opportunities to all the doctors to have such training and to do it ongoingly. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. It's very interesting, and I think you touched upon very important topics. And here I'd like to ask a question to Graham. As far as I understand, all these topics are quite acute, not only here in Russia, but in other countries as well. Maybe you can talk about the experience of the UK. So what do you do with that? How do you deal with that? And what kind of solutions and decisions can you offer?
Thank you very much. My Russian is very poor, so please excuse my slightly better English. But thank you very, very much for the invite to speak. I think the issues are common across countries, and we are in an interesting phase where the relationship between doctors and patients is changing, and that's changing because of better information for patients. Patients are seeing greater convenience in other industries, banking, travel, retail, and so they expect that type of convenience and patient centricity in healthcare. So in the UK, I've been a chief executive of hospitals, but I started as a general practitioner. I was trained as a general practitioner, and interesting to listen to Anna. I was trained to listen very carefully. I was trained to work in teams. I was trained that empathy and care made you a more effective doctor, because patients are more likely to listen to you, are more likely to follow your instructions or your suggestions or your advice. And that was a long time ago. Then computers came into the consultation, and doctors spent more time treating the computer than the patient. But now everybody's used to computers, and so often the screen is shared between the patient and the doctor. So you look at the same screen, and the patient can see what the doctor is writing, can see any advice that is popping up from the electronic health record, and they can discuss options and agree a way forward together. So the whole relationship is changing. So from being an expert, now doctors are expected to be a partner and a coach with patients. So it's almost a change in authority and power. And for some doctors, it's quite a difficult transition. And for other doctors, it's very welcome, because it allows them to work on a more equal basis. It allows them to learn from all of the internet sources that the patients are using, and it's a one way for them to stay up to date. So in terms of reducing workload for general practitioners in the UK, we've had paperless general practice nearly universally now for 20 years. So there's been electronic health records in primary care for 20 years. The first practice to go paperless was in 1975, which is very hard to understand how they did it in those days with the power of computing as they were. And what that's meant is that it's now easy for other professionals in the primary care practice to see the full healthcare record for a patient. So all of the routine diseases like asthma, like high blood pressure and other conditions, diabetes, they're all monitored and managed by nurses within the same practice. And some of those nurses are trained to prescribe. And so that used to be, only the doctors could prescribe, the power of the pen or the power of the keyboard. Now we have nurses that prescribe. We also have pharmacists that prescribe. So we've had a sharing out, if you like, of the responsibilities and duties for patient care across a multidisciplinary team. Also, what we've seen in hospitals is there's often a shortage of specialists, and highly trained people are expensive. And so we've seen the growth of different types of professionals like midwifery assistants to support midwives, physiotherapy assistants to support physiotherapy, and physician assistants to support doctors. So the introduction of electronic health records and protocols has meant that people can safely work at the peak of their training rather than often at the lowest point of their training. And some of those systems allow patients to fill in details prior to consultations, which can speed up consultations, give patients a sense of control and greater access and information, so they're more likely to trust the consultation when it happens. The other thing I just wanted to introduce, I haven't heard much today about, is video-based consultations, which I think are interesting and are exploding in the UK. We've seen many companies start to provide video-based consultations, really important in areas where you have geographic isolation, but also really important in specialties where it's hard to recruit people. So people can work at home and then see patients by video. And this introduces another communication challenge in that the professionals need to be almost extra empathetic to be able to communicate through video rather than face-to-face. You have most of the information coming from non-verbal signals with the patient, but you don't have everything if you're in the same room. So it requires new training and competence to be fully alert to every single sign that you see through video. And we're seeing that video being used in mental health consultations, primary care, all types of consultations, and it's just starting to get to be quite significant. We've had a company called Babylon Healthcare establish itself in the last 7 years, and it's now got 4,000 staff, it's got 400 doctors that work for it, and it provides healthcare both in the UK, Rwanda, it's got a deal in China, and with Samsung phones. So this type of instant access to health professionals anywhere will become a standard that will become probably the standard globally within 10 years, that you see somebody by video first rather than travel to a clinic, wait in line, check in, sit down, see the person and then go home and spend maybe half a day away from work to see somebody for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. So I think that's an interesting thing that we're starting to see. I wanted to pick up a couple of other things that we're also starting to see. So a lot of the electronic health records support doctors to make the right decisions. So they raise awareness of drug problems in terms of interaction between drugs. We also have systems that will help people make a diagnosis. I chair a company that produces software to be able to take a list of symptoms, and it tells the doctor what potential differential diagnosis this is. So a lot of what we're seeing and hearing are helpful for health professionals rather than threatening, but it's still a major change for everyone. So what are the other concrete things that the UK has done to ensure that our healthcare clinicians remain focused on patients? One thing we've done is we have clearly legal processes. You can sue your clinician if you wish to. You can take them to their professional body. That's standard. But in the last 10 years, we've introduced patient surveys for primary care and for inpatient care, cancer care, A&E care. Every board of a healthcare organization tends to start with a patient's story, because you can forget about individual patients when you're looking at masses of data and large numbers. And when we plan changes to healthcare, if they're significant, we have a legal duty to engage the public and to prove that we've done that. We've also seen rating of doctors on websites. Rates MyMD is a US one. We've had other services, I Want Great Care in the UK. These are public comments about the quality of the doctor-patient contact, and so is a very real and permanent review of the professional's ability to communicate. So we've had a number of things which have helped us to keep our health professionals focused on patients. I would like to finish with just one point, which I think is relevant in every system and every country, and I think, we heard Sergey say that respect and engagement of health clinicians is important. I think that's absolutely true. If you want happy patients, you need happy staff. And to have happy staff, you need to engage them, respect them, listen to them, use their expertise and advice, engage them in changes, and they then will become the strongest advocates for the new model of care that you're trying to produce. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. It was very interesting experience that we can use here. And now I'd like to ask Vyacheslav. I think you're listening and thinking how are the issues that you're discussing so common and familiar in what I'm doing. So unsatisfied clients and the need to create more patient-oriented models. So I'd like to ask you, so what from your experience comes to mind that can also be used in the medical care? Like, here are 3 pieces of advice that you can implement and everything will be great. First of all, thank you for inviting me. Usually I ask Alexei for advice, and he tells me what to do, how to have a healthy lifestyle. But never. It seems working, you look great. I think at least it's part of Alexei's merit. So briefly, I can tell you about our experience. So patient-orientedness, client-orientedness, it's about the same. So maybe I will make some comparisons between these two areas, banking and healthcare. I think both banking and healthcare areas are somewhat similar. So we have clients, so trust is very important. When a client comes to us, it's the same as like they come to you. They tell you everything about themselves. And in the same way, we're trying to understand, not maybe in their physical state, in their bodies, but in their financial state, and interaction with other agents, actors. So it's very important that we'll have this reliable and trustful relationship. So in Sberbank, just before this panel, I talked to some old employees from Sberbank. So client-oriented service in Sberbank started in about 2008, 2009. When German Gref started to work there. So before, it was a financial institution aimed at saving, funding of some projects, but systematically, so this we were not really a client-oriented company. So overall, now it's a priority. So for now, for us, it's service, to increase the level of service is a key priority. So client-oriented service has two components: optimal processes and proper staff. So in these two areas, that's where we are working. We have about 1,600 processes, and we are regularly optimizing them. Here we're using AI. It's part of this optimization. Before it was automation.
For example, in the past, people were writing algorithms and used other instruments. Now we're using AI, which is about machine learning patterns. So we proceed from applications and complaints, and then we monitor the whole process, getting rid of those things that are not important. So there are two approaches that could be used. One thing is to optimize costs, but at the moment we want to optimize the process, irrespective of the costs, and the most important thing is the quality of service. So the second area is related to staff members. It's very important for us to have highly motivated and patient-oriented employees. So if we bring both components together, then we can provide a client-oriented service. And this would entail additional revenues and increase the profit rate. I guess it's true both for public institutions and private institutions. So we have already heard about this approach 2.0, and we are thinking about transformation of our business model. And we think that service-based component is preferable for us. Because, you know, selling goods are now moving towards very far channels, because the clients want to get consultations, quite deep consultations. Artificial intelligence cannot provide this in-depth consultations. So I guess it's true for us, because when the customers come to us, we provide a consultation about a wide range of products, or, for example, what the customers might do to increase their earnings. But we are also working towards developing business culture, and it's related to savings culture, and this becomes a service of a higher level. So I think the doctors could also work on the development of healthy lifestyle culture, because now we are living in a special time. You know, it's of course, you can get a pill, but it should also involve lifestyle advice, or maybe recommendations on how to live healthier. And I guess this is the mission of the Doctors 2.0. Two more things that I wanted to mention that could be applied as well, where we overlap. It's not that I want to boast about it. For example, let's take a customer that comes to us who wants to manage his or her finances. We analyze all the documents, and the customer is just sitting somewhere outside of his comfort zone because nobody's talking to him. So maybe he'll get the money, maybe he won't, but he spent a lot of time, he spent his energy, and that's not good from the service point of view, because while the specialists are working with analytics, nobody cares about this person who is left alone. Nobody cares about what happens to him. And the same is true in healthcare sector, because the patient comes and he gets the treatment, but nobody really explains what happens and what kind of treatment the patient is getting. So it would be a good way to explain different processes, maybe chemical process or physical process that take place inside the patient's body. I know many cases like that when there's lack of communication, and it can cause quite many problems. So client-centeredness has two components. One thing is some external factors, being very polite to the customers, smiling to the customers, looking in their eyes. So it's part of communication. And there's also an internal component. It means that it's very important to satisfy the customer. So, of course, the first thing can be taught. As to the second thing, maybe it's passed over by parents or by gods, because it's very difficult to learn this skill. So, putting the customer's shoes, putting yourself in the customer's shoes is not easy. And I wanted to share another case that took place in a European clinic when a young girl needed a consultation of endocrinologist. She needed an endocrinologist consultation. She had problems with her hair loss, or maybe some other dermatological problems. Anyway, she sees a male doctor, and this male doctor doesn't see anything bad about it. Then the girl goes to the female doctor, and the female doctor knows how critical it is for a young woman, and she starts treatment. So that female doctor gets deeper into the situation, and they manage to deal with the problem. The good news is that both in Moscow healthcare and Moscow banking system, there are quite many customer-oriented people. But the bad news is that it's impossible to learn this. And maybe we should just select those people that are good at it and send them to healthcare sector so that they could share their knowledge and skills. Thank you. I guess everybody feels very positive about your talk, and people probably think that they can go to work for you if they fail in their doctor's work. So we don't have much time left. I would like to give the floor to Marielle, and I would like to ask you to share your experience. You are working in a business that creates the connection between the patient and the doctor. You also provide technologies that makes doctors work more effectively. So how do you support your doctors? What kind of training do you provide so that they could use these technologies? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And yes, I'm representing a company working in the health tech industry. So, and I recognize a lot of all of these challenges that are mentioned. And these are too big of a challenge to be solved by one party alone or one technology alone. So this really requires an ecosystem collaboration to make this work in the end. And that means for health tech company that's delivering solutions and services, software and systems, that we really collaborate and enable the staff to be focusing on these patients and to deliver the value of this technology. So then we need, as a vendor, need to focus on how to get, how to collaborate to get that value out of technology, but it's really working together. So technology needs to be reliable, available at all time when the staff needs it. That's the basics. And it needs to be integrated in workflow and really easy to use. And then indeed, like you said, the education needs to be there and also ongoing to make sure that you can also benefit from all of these technology aspects. So one of the examples of this is that we have managed technology services where we can deliver the service to focus on all of the equipment to make that available and to plan also for upgrades over the lifetime. And we have a number of countries where we work together on this, and then you see that you can get to results like 10 to 30% improvements on reducing the waiting time for patients, as well as the throughput of the patients through the system, so that you can treat much more patients along the way. And we use, for example, artificial intelligence to rather from reactive type of maintenance approach go towards proactive type of approach. So we see with the connected systems which systems are at risk, so we can take early action before a system breaks down. So if you have those basics, then if those basics are secured, then you need to be able to get all of the value out of technology. And for that, education is a very important part, and it really needs to be continuous over the life cycle. Both because you see that technology itself changes, but protocols and procedures, they all change. So you really need to continuously educate on this. So examples that we have here where historically it was more education in a context of a classroom. Now you see that based on new technologies, you can have really immersive and lively e-trainings. And the benefit of that is that depending on the person who needs the training, you see that you can, that is based on your own experience already. So you don't have to go through the whole course, but you can focus on the things that you personally need because it's new to you. And also because of the new digital technologies is that you can have this training at your own time and also on your own device when and where you want this. So we have examples on this in ultrasound where we do it like this with parties that are really focusing on this. And then another example I want to give is on alarm and noise management and hygiene. So we see that where we train staff on how to do this well, so vulnerable patients don't stay longer in the hospital than needed. There you see a large effect just after the training. But you also see that if new teams get in or new functionality is available, then this, the effect of the training also reduces again. So you really need to monitor and need to have triggers to do retraining and help staff to adapt to new protocols and to new best practices. And the last example I want to give is especially with younger students or for younger staff, they really like to have, instead of these more team-like approaches, they really want to have personalized feedback continuously and training. So we're experimenting that you have markers, for example, in mammography imaging, that you automatically look at the markers in the image, so you can give feedback to this, the person making the positioning, how to do, if he's doing well, and where are the practical improvements that can be made. So there's a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities to really collaborate and then get really to the value that is there in technology. But we really see that you cannot do it alone and that you need all parties to be truly involved.
Мариэль, спасибо большое, очень интересно.
Thank you very much, Marielle. You shared excellent practical examples, and we appreciate that. It's true that we talk about technologies today, and I guess both patients and doctors are afraid of losing individual relations between patients and doctors. And we have Nuta here, and I would like to ask you about the connection, the interaction that you build between the patients and doctors. Thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear different speakers, and I work in palliative care, and of course patient-centered approach is crucial for us. But this term itself, the patient orient approach, sounds quite dry to me, and so I don't like it. There is another word, empathy, but again, I don't really like this word, empathy. But we have our own words, and they start with the prefix co. For example, compassion, and co-feeling. So this compassion, this ability to suffer together with the other person, to feel the other person's pain as if it was yours, this is the key thing for any medical specialist. My mother, who is my teacher, Vera Milyonshikova, and my father as well, he was a very patient-oriented medical specialist. He was the first to give anesthesia during women's delivery. So he was a pioneer there, and they focused on pain a lot, and they used to start their talks with the patients with finding out their complaints. You know, sometimes I think that many people forgot about it. So what brings you here? Such questions like what tortures you? What kind of pain do you have? And I remember that my parents were trembling whenever I hit myself, because this ability to feel other person's pain is special. You know, not everybody has this, but when people choose the medical profession, they can be romantic people. They are usually bright and you know, very full of empathy and compassion. So what happens later on? Why is it that they turn into somebody else? And they see people as their adversaries, the patients are their adversaries, and they are ready to fight. And I had to reach the age of 40 when I discovered this meaning. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. You know, if the doctor doesn't feel loved, the doctor can't love their patient, because if we can't share, if we can't give away certain things, we can't help, because we don't have enough love to share. I remember that when we started working at a hospice, my mother was never afraid of accepting amateurs, I mean doctor amateurs, and she was working for a long time in a Soviet system of healthcare. Still she wasn't afraid of taking amateurs on board. So we know the system, the Soviet system of healthcare. Many people want to bring certain things from there. And why is it that we began to have palliative care after the Soviet Union collapse? You know, because Soviet Union used to stick to army principles. You know, if we take a look at our hospitals that were built in the 70s or 80s, long corridors, nurses that have to sleep there, the doctors usually wear a white uniform and phonendoscope, so we have to stand still if we see the doctor. And whenever the doctor came to the patient's bed with the people behind him, and so they're checking the medical record. So what do we see here? This patient arrived yesterday. She had a problem with her pancreatic gland. And what's behind this? There is no patient behind this data, no information that this lady had her son who died, who came here after being in 2 clinics, who had a sleepless night, who is not sure whether her relatives would be allowed or not, who suffers from pain syndrome, who is afraid of her diagnosis, who has lost her child and maybe wants just to die and doesn't want any treatment. So this is what's important to see instead of just looking at the medical records.
Unfortunately, Soviet medical help didn't teach us to see people in patients, and that's why my mom was such a sort of innovator, so a successful person, because it's so strange, it's so natural. And I'd like to go back that people who choose to become doctors, they already have all the necessary qualities that they lose while they are learning and practicing. So what can we do then? I have 2 very important examples. So the Center of Palliative Help, where I'm a director right now, and one very small village hospice, completely funded by Vera Foundation in Yaroslavl region. The Center of Palliative Help is after some big scandal with Hospital 11, where staff was quite aggressive and complex, and why people from specialists should become hospice doctors. They didn't want that, and at the same time this thing of this glory and being the first Moscow hospice, which was quite harmful at some period of time. When you think that you working at the best structure, and you stop learning and changing and making yourself better, and that's why I became a director. So for all my suggestions, I heard we are the best under Vera. That wasn't like that, or why are you coming to us with all your palliative help? So it was very hard, and changes started since when we started to recognize people. So patient-orientedness started when we respect every doctor, every nurse, every orderly, everyone who spent hours to commute, and it's very hard to work through such hours, and they'd like to change it. So we started creating this help by creating this new relationship, respectful relationship with the personnel. I had a lot of scandals, and there were couches in the doctor's room, and I forbade it, and I decided that no one should sleep at their work, but I organized restroom and lunch rooms, and I provide all employees with at least some food, some nice things, because they should feel that they want to come to work. We spent a lot of time to create informational environment. Informational environment is important for both patients, and we talked about it. They should know what kind of help they will receive, where, and it should be easily accessible. And it's also very important for employees, because employees will not comply with our will if they don't understand the full picture. Why do we do that? Why should we reduce this and that? Why requirements changing? Why are some financial components changing? So any actions of the leaders can't be done without some significant explanation to the staff what's behind it. So we explain to personnel, and the personnel reacts totally different to all the complaints of patients. As for patients, as for their complaints, I really like complaints from patients. I encourage them, and the thing we had to change is to teach doctors and nurses not to hide mistakes and not to hide complaints, not to hide their faults that are usually hidden in all our inpatient clinics, not to hide that patients complaining on pain, though they were given painkillers, some mistakes by nurses or doctors. So not to hide all this, and through that they learned how to require from the leader to have comfortable working conditions. If we have such comfortable work conditions, then we are demanded now to provide this quality services. So it's an inevitable result. So everything we get, then we give back, because we are filled up. If we don't receive anything, we can't give anything back. So to teach doctors to learn complaints and to make them understand that it's the only way to improve our work. If we can't hear our patients, how can we change our work? How can we improve it? So many years ago, when I was the head of the charitable foundation, we made a survey among 200 patients and 200 their family members to understand what they're looking at and what's important for them. And I was surprised that both family members and patients, at the moment it surprised me, now of course it's not surprising me, the efficiency, quality of medical care was at the last point. So the efficiency and quality of the medical care were the last ones. The first one was friendly atmosphere and friendly attitude of the personnel too. It's right. When women, for instance, go to a gynecologist or to the delivery room, first of all we look at the attitude of doctors, because a pregnant woman is a very vulnerable state. That's how patients and family members look at that. You look at how you are being treated. The second, it was wards and neighbors at wards. So who will be my neighbor in the ward? So pay attention how much attention family members think about wards. So are they in air conditioner or this or that? So so when so it's very important to understand that the reason that people look so much at all these repairs of the ward, it's this compensation of the quality attitude. So the center of palliative help is still not repaired. We have some wires hanging from the ceiling. So I was mostly afraid 5 years ago that be so many complaints, like one toilet for the whole floor. But there was no complaints at all that we don't have something sufficient. Because if you remember some old cartoon, so when it's a very good picture because it covers some hole in the wallpapers. So through this information environment, through the attitude, we can make so much. Because do you know what the hospitals are associated with? They're associated with pain and some limits, some prohibition. Because hospice from the word hospitality, so from this hospitality. So hospice derives from another word, but that's what people think. And in Russia, the word hospital has the same root as the word pain. So first of all, we see the sign that tells us not to smoke. Then we see that all kind of prohibitions, like you can't come wearing outwear, without shoe wear. So some visitation time is very limited. So all these restraints and limits. First thing I did is I removed all these signs and I replaced them. Like, we welcome you coming with your children. We are open for visiting 24 hours a day. You can come with your pets if they have medical records. We encourage you to celebrate your your birthdays there. I'm not lying, you can come and see. And I remember how employees removed these signs at the beginning. And then they started loving it, and now they are proud of it. And for me, it's very important that a lot of people who worked before, they're still working there. And this hospice in a village that I mentioned, when I first came there, it was this very terrible smell of urine and some tied up grannies and some special room for dying patients where they were locked in. And now the same employees work in hospices visited by president, same people, because now they are loved and now they were given the opportunity to be good, to be kind. So when we removed all these restrictions from the doctors, when we showed them they're the best, that you're the best, you are doing that. And so when every one of us is afraid to become a patient, so the most surprising example for me is the death of an oncologist in St. Petersburg, Andrei Pavlenko. I think he was the first doctor who was so openly talked about how painful it is to be sick. When an oncologist is telling you that it's very painful to be sick, and he asked not to be that post-mortem hasn't been done on him. Because so the only thing that we should remember, if you want to understand a patient, you should become a patient. So think about yourself as a patient and treat the patient the same as you'd like to be treated yourself. So that's the only golden rule. In the gynecologist office, you can't just not lock the door when a woman is on this gynecological chair. And the doctor can't be with a smartphone next to their ear or with some very strange music. The phone should be off when we are walking. All the small, very trivial things that I can't even put in 15 minutes. They take the whole course that I'm having at the university. So to doctors and how different it is if you're under stress or not. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. It's very important topic, and I see that everyone's listening, just holding their breath. But we have to listen to other speakers as well. So I'd like to give the floor to Olga. when we talked, I was surprised that some topics that Anna mentioned now, that more related to hospice, some of them even implemented in this Center of Multifunctional Services. So this personal attitude really surprised me and struck me. So Olga, could you please share your experience very, very fast? I'll try to be very brief. I want to share a lot. First of all, I'd like to say hello. And so this word, in Russian it means be healthy. It's really the gist of this assembly. When we talk about examples of this humane attitude, I think one of the tools is the collection of such stories, cases that we collect, and our staff face so many such examples. It's one of them, and I'd like to share a very simple example. When some mom comes with a baby, and they had they were late to go to the outpatient clinics, and it was heavily raining outside, and one employee gave his umbrella. So all these touching stories that we collect, not from our employees, they allow us to create, as Alexei said, the environment that really maybe not show the example how you can behave. So I'd like to start with a story. So in 2017 we started the project of sincere service, and we thought it's impossible to change the consciousness of an employee, to teach them to be loyal, to be engaged. It's been discussed a lot about employee engagement, but it turned out it's possible. So all the stories that we collect from our employees, they become like this self-creating environment. It shows how an employee can behave in this or that situation. Another example. An older woman came to our center to take documents related to offering her flat to her relative, and our employee had a doubt if she understands that she offered this flat. So she started asking questions and realized that this woman didn't really understand what she did. So the deal was cancelled, and this old woman kept her flat. So that creates the environment. No, it's not about reputation. It's about humane attitude towards each other. And when I listened about doctors, when doctors come to us, I'd like that our employees with such heartedness treated them with such hospitality. It's very important to ask the right questions that will help our client to understand what's going on. Because an employee cannot always render a service, but they can always help a person what to do next. And that's our employees' task. We started that the carriers of this ideology, of course, are the leaders of our centers. There are 130 of them, and the center's leader should believe in this, should understand that's how it should be done. So this humane attitude, this engagement of employees are important, and then employees will be happier. One of requirements to our leaders is to be always in the room. So our bar is 80%. We haven't reached it yet, but at the beginning it was met with great resistance. How can I be in the room when I have a lot of work in my office? How can I be in the room with some people and not to do my work in my room? But now leaders that are in the room with clients, with their employees, they make more correct decisions, they understand the situations much faster, and they can make these examples and make them further and reorganize the system. I'd like to say a couple more words about leaders. So there are 10,000 people, but we really bet on leaders. How can we show what we invented about client-orientedness, about sincere service? Of course, it's important that the leader who are in place, that they really believe in it, feel it. I think to feel it's very important. It's very important for us. I think I should stop. We have so many tools that we implement to make an even better environment. Thank you, Olga. It's very emotional, very interesting. Natalia, I know it's very hard to speak. Last, we have just 1 minute. And so, do you have anything to add to our discussions that we haven't talked about yet? Thank you for inviting me. I represent the specialty of plastic surgery. It's not an easy specialty, and it means patients during appointments of two categories. One type of patients who come to improve their appearance, taken into account because they have some kind of deformation, innate or acquired. So it's some kind of reconstructive surgery where we should clearly understand and mind all this complexity of surgeries, and to make all the necessary diagnostics and perform it up to mathematical precision, the procedure. And there is another category of patients, people who come with how to improve their aesthetical part of their appearance. It's a big group of patients, and during appointments it's very important not to be only highly educated, highly skilled, a good surgeon, but also a good psychologist. When during Soviet times I was trained, we have 2 years of residency, though there were no specialty yet, and a lot of attention was paid by our teachers to psychological moments, to relationship, to attitude to a patient. So a consult should not be more than 20 minutes, and it should include psychological status of a patient, to understand their desires and the possibilities. So it's either possible to make surgery or not. And 20 minutes. So now we never have complications or because it was very clear. Still, I don't know how to make a standard as to psychological attitude, psychological participation and cooperation with the patient. I think it's such an individual thing that comes with experience. But still, first of all, especially in our work, we pay a lot of attention to integrity, because people are very interested in it because of financial attractiveness. And sometimes doctors offer something that's not supposed to be, that's not good for a patient. It's not what improves really patient's appearance or solve some issues just to earn money. Unfortunately, this issue exists, and not only in Russia. That's why, first of all, it's be fair, and second, it's being highly skilled and good technologists. So when you're fair and sincere about what you can offer. And of course, there are some departments as for some technical possibilities of prototyping, 3D visualization of the future appearance of the client. And after all the consultations using all this equipment, it's still very important to listen to what the patient thinks. Do they agree to continue the consultation? Have they made up their mind to make it? or maybe after what they saw, they don't want it anymore. So, patient's mood really is the basis of the success of a surgery. You may be really like very skilled, but if a patient does not really agree with that, traumatized and disagree, they will never thank you for that. So individual approach, fairness, respect to the patient, and of course to your specialty. As a result, a patient should be thankful to you. Thank you. Very nice closing. Thank you to all participants. Thank you to the audience. So I think we should learn that nothing can replace doctors. Their role will be transformed. New technologies give us new opportunities that we should respect and move forward.